We'll probably give it a minute more. We are almost at 11.
We are about a few seconds to go. Okay.
I know we are at 11, but I think probably we'll give it a minute more, right? I see quite a few people still in the waiting, and
let's get going.
Maybe we give it. Yep. So maybe like I said, let's give it a minute, and then we will kick off.
Kunal, 10 seconds. Let's go.
Excellent. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Actually, let me rephrase that, right? Good morning to everyone on the West Coast. Good afternoon to our participants from the East Coast. And a special thank you, right, for anyone joining from Europe at this late hour. And, before I introduce myself and, the other presenters we have from DHL today, if we can move on to slide 2. Yes, thank you. I just want to read the antitrust statement, right, to make sure, we are all on the same page. So this is for all participants, right? So please be reminded that this meeting needs to be conducted in accordance with the applicable competition and antitrust laws. And all participants are aware of the fact that an infringement of competition law may not be committed by hardcore competition law violations, such as agreeing on resale prices, price increase among competitors, but also by mere exchange of sensitive information. Right, so everyone joining this call affirms their commitment to promote free competition and protect the public and other market participants from restrictive trade practices and taking upholding the principles, right, set forth. So, so this is your, your presenters for the day. So I am Kunal Punjabi, the sector head for life sciences and chemicals for DHL Global Forwarding. And, as you would have guessed, right, I'm on the West Coast. That's why I started off with a good morning. And I have, with me, Patricia Cole, who is a global head for temperature management solutions, and Dennis Cancino, who is our head of air freight for the capacity management, right? So we are going to be your 4, hosts today, along with Devendra from BSMA. And I would like to thank BSMA first, of course, for inviting us to present today. And, it's a great pleasure for us, right, to partner with BSMA in their mission to, bring along all the biopharmaceutical industry and, share the best practices and knowledge, right? So it's a pleasure partnering with BSMA, and, we look forward to working with BSMA in the future as well. So talking about the pandemic, right, we all know, right, since the last 6 months, most of us have either been in a lockdown or social distancing or pretty much restricted, right? But our medical force, right, or the people at the front line have been dealing with millions of cases of coronavirus, right? And what that has led to an increased demand of PPE, right? As you can see, these are some numbers we were able to get. And this is the monthly demand for healthcare workers only, right? So basically, the demand is 89 million masks, right? 30 million gowns. And this has all gone up just because of the pandemic, right? And, we all saw that we had challenges 6 months ago when, when the PPE was in shortage. Things are better. They seem to be flowing better now, but, we are still not anywhere close to perfection. And at the same time, the biggest challenge is the vaccine, right? So once the vaccine, which is in development, the end to this pandemic, right, will only be possible if we can effectively manage the supply chain and, of course, handle the vaccine distribution to all the end users, right? So that's the key, and that is what we are going to be focusing on. But before we get into that, right, let me just talk a little bit about, the PPE and the pain points that we saw, and of course, the lessons that we have learned, which would be very much applicable for the vaccines as well, right? So this is, again, just to show the demand. This is numbers from UNICEF. You see the demand has gone up by 100 times, 300 times, and, for medical gloves, right, almost by 2,000 times, during the pandemic, right? So, and this has led to chaos, right? There was chaos not only in the US, but also different European countries, right? We had cases where, the truckers didn't know what to do. There were challenges at, borders in Europe, right? And, PPE was either getting confiscated or restricted or whatever, right? So there were challenges, and we still happen to have shortages of supplies in some key locations or sites or states in the US, right? So this makes it, even more important that we should be ready and prepared for the vaccine logistics, because that is going to be even more complicated, right? Given the perishable nature, it could be frozen, it could be room 228, but the temperature is definitely a different variable compared to the PPE. And of course, the value, right? The value for the vaccines are much, much higher than PPE, right? So that's going to be a big challenge. If we move on to the next slide, and I'm sure all of us have seen this, right? Over the last 6 months, we had different challenges just bringing the PPE in from, in this case, right, as most of the PPE was sourced from China, and it was kind of a single source, origin, and that's why the challenges were much more pronounced, which hopefully should be little less for the vaccine, given, the vaccine is going to be produced in different parts of the world and not restricted to a single source, right? But, these are the different challenges, as you can see, right? The first is the bottleneck at the origin, which is, making sure you pick up the shipments, bringing to the port. And the second challenge, right, which was even more of a challenge in April, because all of a sudden, right, all airlines, or most of the airlines, right, had canceled flights. There were no passenger flights operating, which basically, is responsible for carrying bulk of the freight, right? So that was a challenge. There were also issues with customs, right? And when I say customs and regulation, this is not only at the destination country, right? The customs issues were also at origin, right? When we saw China imposing new regulations, and I think it was rightly done, right? It was like a gold rush, right? People from everywhere, right? They started producing PPE, and there was challenge with quality and of course the checks, right? And we saw cases where we would get in shipments and 20% of the shipment was not of proper quality, right? Or the standard was below the standard that could be used by medical professionals. We also had this challenge with warehousing, right? With with PPE, right? Not having the proper life science expertise and the warehouses. And I think this is going to be a bigger challenge with the vaccine, right? Because the temperature requirements that would be involved in the vaccine, the warehousing is definitely going to be a big challenge, and the final mile, right? Which was also a challenge for PPE. But, I can only imagine how difficult it will be if we need to transport it in a frozen environment, right? So these are the pain points. And of course, this is, so DHL has also come out with a white paper with McKinsey, right, which talks about, how to be prepared for the pandemic. And of course, this is more or less the chapter 1, which talks about the challenges that the governments and the countries face during the, the pandemic. If we can move on to the next slide. Yep, so this is, this is the big challenge, right? Or the bigger challenge that we will have once we start distributing the vaccine, right? And these are just some numbers that, we have put together. And this is assuming that, 70% of the population needs to be vaccinated, right? To get herd immunity. And, considering that, and, we still don't know if there will be a single dose of the vaccine that would be enough, or we would need 2 doses, or would we need more than that, right? So here we are, this is the study that DHL did with McKinsey, right? It's 1.8 vaccine dose is what is required. So with that, we would require around 10 billion doses of the vaccine over the next 2 years. And what is also interesting to know is today, right, the global production of vaccines is only 3.5 billion, right? And this is for all types of vaccines, right? It's a flu vaccine, the meningitis, and all the other vaccines, right? So when the globe is producing 3.5 billion vaccines today, we would require 10 billion vaccines to get to herd immunity and, get 70% of the population vaccinated, right? So the stakes here are even higher. It is going to be a bigger challenge, right? Given, it's too early, right? So normally a vaccine takes anywhere between 3 to 5 years, from the time it's started to the time it's finally approved and goes off to distribution. But in this case, it's going to be within 6 to 9 months, right? Or, hopefully around that phase or that time period. So that would require at least 200,000 pallet shippers if everything has to move by air. And we are talking about 15 million cooling boxes, right? And around 15,000 flights if all the 10 billion vaccines need to move by air. So this is going to be a big challenge. And if we move on to the next slide, so, as you all are aware, right? And I think this is something that we all read on a daily basis. And, this is a time where, every company that is in preclinical phase or anyone who is getting into phase 1 or 2 is getting the required attention, right? Given how important this vaccine is going to be. So, there were around 250 candidates who are still in the running. And out of which, as of early September, we had 7 candidates who are in phase 3 of the vaccine, right? So they are in phase 3. And of course, the world was surprised by, the Sputnik, which came out by, the Gamaleya Institute in Russia. That and a few others have now been given emergency use authorization, right? So this is where the vaccine candidates stand. And of course, this is a very, fast changing, scenario, right? So, different companies are moving from preclinical to phase 1, 2, and of course, more companies are getting into phase 3, right? But, we are all eagerly waiting to see, when and which company will be approved and would, of course, get the approval, right, to start distributing this vaccine. The bigger challenge, right, and if you move on to the next slide, is that the different vaccines that we are seeing or hearing or reading have different requirements, right? And the key thing, right, which I have mentioned before as well, is the shortened time, right? The development cycle has been reduced, and that could mean that, we need to ship everything in a deep frozen environment, right? Given lack of stability data, to ensure the efficacy of the product, it would or it could need to be shipped in a frozen environment, right? But that is only for a certain type of vaccines, right? A few other vaccine types are already, projecting information that they should be okay if it is distributed in a 228C environment, right? Which is the broad, vaccines or, what we see today. Most of the vaccines which have the stability data and which have been developed over a period of years are being shipped at 228. Again, just quickly so that we all understand, there are different types of vaccines. The one which is the new or, one that we have never seen before is the RNA-based vaccine, which you can see there at the bottom. Those are the vaccines which, being first time, such kind of vaccines are being launched, they might need to be transported at a -70 or even a -80 Celsius, temperature requirement, right? The others like inactivated virus or the viral vector, or a protein subnet or a viral vectors, these could be transported at 228C. And again, it might be they are transported the main leg in a frozen environment, but definitely they are now coming out that, these could be distributed at least in the final leg as or in a 228C environment. So if we can move on to the next slide. And this is again, right, given that we do not have the stability data, if the vaccine has to move in a stringent scenario, which is basically keeping it frozen throughout, the whole supply chain, it is going to be a big challenge, right? But like I said, right, we are seeing some companies who are talking about moving into a conventional scenario, which is the 228C. And, if not for the upstream operations or, for the intermediate product, but at least for the final leg, it could be moving into a 228C environment. The next slide is also talking about, where we see the challenges, right? So this is again, the implications for the cold chain requirement, right? Again, imagine, requiring 15 million boxes, right? And all of these requiring dry ice. Do we have enough dry ice in the globe? Do we have the production capabilities to produce so much dry ice to be able to move all of them? Do we have enough pallet shippers, right? Even if we talk about 200,000 pallet shippers, do we have those many pallet shippers today? These are all questions that, everyone here is working on. And of course, as I said before, right, the complication, right, is more at the upstream side of it rather than the final leg, right? And again, the final leg could be more challenging if we have to move it in a frozen environment, right? So that is still something we all are waiting to know, but that's what we are seeing, reading, and of course we are hearing from some of our clients as well. The next slide basically talks about the different archetypes that we have. What we see would be used for distribution of the vaccine, right? So the first scenario, which is direct shipment to the point of use, this is pretty much what we would see, in the phase one, right? When the vaccines are going to be produced in limited quantities. And again, these could be going directly to the end users, right? Which could be medical workers, the army, or, people of old age who would be given preference, to get this vaccine once it is ready and available to all. Right. And again, these different archetypes, we could move from phase 1 to phase 2 to 3, in some countries, or in some country, we might directly start from phase 2 before we get into phase 3, right? So again, this is on a high level global basis, the archetypes that we see for the vaccine distribution. So phase 2, which again is where there would be kind of a local cross-docking. And of course, the cooling boxes are, then stored and then given to the final users, right? So this is something that could be coming into effect sooner, right, or later, right? Because the fact is, the biggest challenge that we will be seeing is how and how and where they will be able to do some kind of kitting as well, right? So if there is a requirement to provide the ancillary products or the accessories to go with the vaccine, I think the cross-docking or the local warehousing solution, right, when we move into those options, could help, overcome some of those challenges as well. If we move on to the next slide. So this slide is again, taking into account, the stringent requirements and the convention scenario. As we mentioned, right, if this vaccine needs to be distributed in a frozen environment, as you can see on the world map, there are around 25 countries which would take care of, say, 2.5 billion of the population, where we should be able to distribute the vaccine in a frozen environment, if that is the requirement, right, or under the stringent scenario. If we move on to the conventional scenario, which is shipping these vaccines at a 228C environment, there are 60 countries globally where it would be feasible to distribute these vaccines, right? So again, there will be challenges. We know there are some countries, especially in the sub-Saharan Africa, where, we still know that, getting dry ice or a freezer or even a cooler, right, is not, not as easy to find or to use compared to other parts of the world, right? So under this scenario, the conventional scenario, we see 60 countries and a population of 5 billion who should be able to get, or, where it will be feasible to distribute the vaccine, without too many challenges. The next slide is talking about, again, just summarizing, right, the different supply chain archetypes, but also the different scenarios, right? So what we see, and, again, this is due to the lack of stability data, the initial phase would move under the stringent scenario of -70 to -80C. And when we do this, right, there would be a big demand for dry ice. And, there could be multi-doses which would be shipped together, right? And these would all be, with dry ice, right? And it would traditionally only be the vials which would be shipped in this scenario, right? Once we move on to the conventional scenario, which is 2 to 8, typically these would be single source vials, and these could be packed with some of the other accessories, right? It could be the syringe, and of course the other accessories that are required, in a package like you have there on the slide, right? So what we also see is, with the dry ice, the dependency on dry ice going away, and of course moving more into a single dose packaging solution with a vial, with a syringe and other stuff, we will be moving from a dense packaging to more of a volumetric packaging, right? So that will bring other challenges. But this is what we foresee would be the different scenarios for the vaccine distribution, and of course the different supply chain archetypes that we have seen in our study. If we move on to the next slide, this is basically, I know I have covered in brief a little bit about chapter 1 and chapter 2 of the white paper that we have. But there is also a chapter 3, right, which talks about, the framework to tackle future emergencies. And again, we all hope and, we wish that this is the last pandemic, but, it's always, not going to happen in this way, right? There could be a future pandemic. And the third chapter is basically talking about a framework to tackle future emergencies, right? And this is the link. If anyone is interested, right, you could download the whole white paper, which you can just click on this link and of course download the white paper to read the white paper in detail, and of course, get more information on the challenges with the PPE and the vaccine distribution. So with this, we will move on to the next slide, and I will hand over to my colleague Dennis to talk about the other challenges and of course, what DHL is doing to come up with more solutions for that.
Yeah, thank you, Kunal. I think Kunal framed it up really well around the challenges that certainly we foresee that are going to happen in the full end-to-end supply chain, although this slide here will focus more on really the challenges around the air cargo and capacity arena for a large distribution like the potential we have to see here with the vaccines. From a supply chain capacity perspective, some of the considerations that we will have to make as an overall industry will be in and around things like the ability for ground handling, both at origin and destination airports, to handle areas like the ability for cold storage, the ability to have enough plugins for temp control containers, the ability for enough floor space to handle cross-docking. The question is, will the ground handling be able to absorb the demand that we expect here to see with a large scale of vaccine distribution? I think germane to that as well is really in and around the repositioning of export and import freight for domestic distribution. A consideration needs to be made around the capability of trucking demand, the ability to hire the right equipment depending on the country you are in, the infrastructure of the country you are in for domestic distribution, and again, going back to some of the requirements of possible reefer trucks and whether or not that could be a bottleneck if the demand spikes as some expect it to do. One of the main considerations we are given to regarding the possibility of bottlenecks as well is around temperature controlled containers. We certainly see and know and understand that from an industry perspective, the utilization of temp control containers is really at a high level. The existing pharmaceuticals and vaccines that Kunal mentioned previously, those will not cease. So whatever we move from a COVID-19 vaccine perspective will be above and beyond what we see from existing vaccines and pharmaceuticals. And the question remains whether or not the temp control container community will be able to absorb that spike in demand as well. So you have those three areas: the ability for airports to properly manage ground handling services, the injection into road freight for domestic distribution, and also the temp control containers that need to be considered as part of any solution design for vaccine distribution. I think the second piece here that I think often gets overlooked as well is around air cargo security. One must ask and one must consider, if you are a manufacturer or distributor of a vaccine such of this type, is what measures have to be taken to ensure that you're able to protect the vaccine through its leg and through its journeys from origin to destination up until final delivery. How do you protect the vaccine of this type? How do you ensure that there is no risk to the integrity of the vaccine? And how do you ensure that it can't be tampered with throughout the course of its journey? And I think the last part of consideration also has to be around the required accessories that will come with the vaccine as well. It's not just the vaccine, but it's also the medical equipment that is collateral to it, things like vials, syringes, and needles. Consideration needs to be given to those suppliers as well. How will that cargo be transported? Will it be transported all by air? If they're all transported by air, does it then cause a bottleneck relative to general capacity? Certainly something for manufacturers and distributors alike to consider. And I think lastly, and Kunal touched on this briefly here, is really around dry ice capabilities. So if we're talking about deep frozen movement of temperatures at -60 and below, a question of whether there's enough dry ice to produce is one thing, as Kunal mentioned a few slides ago. But the second piece is the loadability of dry ice in airframes today. So certainly there are limitations to the amount of dry ice that airlines and airframes can accommodate. And that has to be a consideration as well, because that can certainly cause a bottleneck depending on how significant the distribution is of frozen material. So these are all the considerations that I know DGF has taken into account as we continue down the path of developing a vaccine distribution solution. There are many unknowns, as Kunal has mentioned here earlier, but these are certainly the areas that we know remain in scope that will come into play for any successful distribution of a vaccine globally. One of the areas that DGF has developed over many years is our Star Broker flight network. Our Star Broker group is an organization within DHL Global Forwarding who really manages two components. The first of which is large-scale capacity agreements across multiple countries in Europe. But more pertinent to this discussion is the ability to manage our charter or dedicated flight network globally. If I was to look at this flight network and map prior to the pandemic, there'd be a lot less planes and a lot less lines. Our Star Broker team, as they have done for many years, is constantly evaluating the needs from a global, regional, and country level perspective to make the determination of where and when DHL Global Forwarding has to inject capacity and flights in order to best mitigate commercial capacity constraints. And we will continue to do so. If you consider what has happened during the pandemic and some of the flights that we have put on, it has allowed us to successfully manage cargo flows without very many interruptions even with the reduction of passenger flights globally. Starbroker will continue to do this even as we move out of the general pandemic and into a vaccine distribution type of arena. They will consider again where the capacity needs to be put on from a global, regional, and country level perspective. It is certainly an area of strength for DGF, from a global perspective, and again, allows us to mitigate any concerns around available commercial capacity. I will now turn over to Patricia Cole to continue the discussion here regarding our life science and Life Connects services as well.
Thank you, Dennis. DGF offers a suite of solutions that provide a GXP compliance for all pharma shipments. This requires the evaluation of trade lanes, customized solutions, monitoring, and proactive intervention. Air Thermonet being the standard solution for all temperature-controlled shipments in the DGF network. It's equipped with SOPs that are created on a lane level, inclusive of lane risk assessments and milestone tracking. Life Connects, as Dennis mentioned, which is going to be the layer on top of the Starbroker charters for pharma shipments, is the tailor-made solution which provides the SOP lane risk assessments and, if needed, a same-day specialty courier providing white glove services. On the next slide, you can see where the Life Connects difference is really how the service is designed to provide the highest level of reliability, proactive communication, and intervention when necessary. The fully compliant GXP service allows our clients to customize their SOPs and have embedded lane risk assessments that are designed specifically to include validation and qualification of packaging using the prior analysis of big data that we've accumulated over the past 12 years. Allowing our clients to assess and standardize their risk calculations based upon shipment needs and tolerances is really what the Life Connect service is all about. The service is also IoT agnostic. Any device can be used, and it can be linked to the portal for review, provided it's accepted on the airline that's chosen in the LRA. Life Connects brings a dedicated monitoring and quality team to the table, providing the timely and secure transportation needs for our clients that require more than just a standard pharma service. Next slide. So when we talk about a lane risk assessments, lane risk assessment or LRAs provide our clients with a historical view of lane data that's based upon multiple factors and a visual that allows for efficient and quick decision making. This takes into consideration not only the temperature requirements, but also the tolerances of the product needs. Here at DGF, we have, can you go to the next slide, Dennis? We've improved our LRA, or our lane risk assessment tool. We like to call it LRA 2.0. And the improved tool not only includes the latest packaging technology, but also extreme weather and seasonality based upon the regions, average tarmac time, which is based upon our preferred life sciences carrier data, as well as our own DGF station certification of handling of life science shipments in a temperature controlled environment. So LRA 2.0 is a product of the voice of our customers. It's echoing what is critical to their supply chain when they're transporting life-saving goods. Next slide, Dennis. As part of our pharma suite, the visibility, monitoring, and intervention of shipments is aligned with the SOPs designed with product viability in mind. That's always key. Shipments are monitored by a central team, keeping all the critical milestones as the touch points for on-time performance, and product continuity is the top priority for us. As you can see, the next slide, DPDHL as a whole continues to invest in its global network of life science and healthcare specialists. The locations that we have provide compliant and GXP temperature controlled facilities, and we do provide a truly global solution for every temperature range and pharma shippers' needs. While we are in times of uncharted territory here with the COVID vaccine pending, DPDHL continues to review the global needs to properly distribute a vaccine based upon temperature, government regulations, packaging requirements, and preparing to invest wherever necessary to make that happen. Next slide. So as DPDHL continues to invest in its global network of life science and healthcare specialists locations, one of the investments that's been recently made is the additional freezers that have been placed at the DHL supply chain warehouse in Nijmegen. It's now equipped with 170 freezers to handle storing vaccine-related materials if needed. And the investment of the additional 120 freezers is reflective of the innovation and the forward thinking that DHL provides to its client base. When we look at the DHL presence globally, next slide, Dennis. We look at the map here in terms of where the coverage is. I mean, you can see that the presence rivals none when it comes to the reach and presence of the volume that's transported both via air and ocean by the highly trained staff. Next slide. So as DHL Global Forwarding, our certified network, we do have 118 stations that are certified. That's supported by a network and a quality team that not only carries out all the audits, but also makes sure that the stations are trained to the highest extent. We're always evolving the GXP network of those stations, and that includes today 32 CEIV certified stations and 52 QEP certified stations, allowing for over 2,000 trade lane pairings with temperature ranges from ambient to minus 80 degrees Celsius. Then when we take a look at DHL Global Forwarding in the US, the network reflects the certified hub and gateway locations that provide compliant and service-oriented landscape with the technology and the capabilities that are required to service all our pharma clients. Each US location for DGF has the capability also to overlay Air Thermonet and Life Connects based upon the client's requirements. Thank you for your time.
I take over. Team, are you ready for the Q&A? Kunal, Patricia, Dennis, are you ready?
Yeah, Devendra, yes, we are.
So a bunch of questions have been streaming in, and if I may take them one at a time. The first question that was asked was, and this is for Kunal, and by the way, the question you already answered, but I'll repeat it anyway. What assumption was made about the number of doses that have to be given for the immunization in the calculation of pallet shippers and other parameters you mentioned?
Perfect. Thank you, Devendra. And, as I mentioned while covering this slide, right? So, there are a lot of uncertainties at this time, right? We still don't know where and, whether it's a single dose, multi-dose, what the vaccine would be in the future. But what we have done is in our study with McKinsey, we have based our calculation on, around 10 billion vaccines would be required, as I mentioned, to get 70% herd immunity. And, these would be a mix of frozen versus 228C, and it would move on a mix of, either pallet shippers or cooling boxes. And also assume that, everything moves by international air freight, right? So that's what we have done, right? So it's a mix. We don't know yet, right? We don't have a crystal ball which will tell us, hey, what the vaccine is going to be. But this is, based, and this is the assumptions that we have made while, while we made that study.
A question has been raised to focus on the Achilles heel of the supply chain for the vaccines. And the question is, in the major regions of the United States of America, Europe, Asia, where do we have, from a DHL point of view, deep frozen capacity bottlenecks? Question for either Patricia or Kunal.
I can say that, Kunal. At this time, Devinder, it's very difficult to say where those bottlenecks are going to be because we're still unsure about the distribution of the vaccine. But rest assured, DHL is being as proactive as possible based on the information that we have to, again, invest where necessary and collaborate for certain with our partners.
Could I elaborate on that question, Patricia? Knowing the current DHL network, where do you have the most robust capacity for deep frozen storage and handling?
The most robust capacity was on the slide with Nijmegen, obviously. That's where we have the biggest amount of deep freeze capacity.
A question asked was, does blockchain technology fit in the awesome challenge of tracking shipments of vaccines? Is that being envisioned anywhere at DHL or someplace else that you know? Any one of you?
So blockchain is something that is being reviewed within DPDHL. At this time, it's not been an active participant in the vaccine task force. Not to say that it won't be in the future, but not currently.
Thank you. A question I see on the chat screen is, what additional capacities can be expected from what you mentioned, the global star broker flight network of DHL, to overcome some of the limitations of cargo capacity? Because many of us believe that the cargo capacity has been somewhat decimated.
Yeah, I think in general, there has been a number of flights injected since the beginning of the pandemic. I think if we look back at the time frame of March and April, the pathway was fairly certain. We knew exactly what limitations we were going to have to and from what destinations, and it was not easy, but we were very quick to be able to put on equipment. I think when we talk about the possibility of there being capacity challenges relative to vaccine distribution, I would say the landscape remains still a little unclear in terms of where and what we'll need to do. I can tell you that our star broker team continues to evaluate, continues to measure the amount of capacity that is no longer in the market, whether it be from passenger flight reductions or the elimination of flight schedules in their entirety. I would say that it's probably a safe bet to know and to see that there will be additional flights coming online. However, the likes of those are yet to be determined, only because the landscape remains unknown at this point. So the star broker team continues to evaluate that and will make the best decisions to mitigate commercial capacity shortages.
I'm reading this question and I'm trying to get my nose to the screen. Is there any clarity yet on how vaccines will be delivered to the public in each country? I know it's a tough question, but is there any country that you are knowledgeable about in terms of delivering the vaccine in the last mile?
At this time, Devinder, there's nothing that we can actually talk to based on NDAs with our clients. So to answer that question, no, we really can't respond.
Now, this person very rightly elaborates on the question by saying, for example, in the US, will individuals be injected by their personal physicians, or will there be some strategy for mass vaccination? I think we as a team are really not qualified to address that question, but it's a damn good question for which we at BSMA will come up with the facts and figures and share it with everyone that has participated today on the program. There's a question I'm reading here. The presentation raised the question of whether there is adequate dry ice supply to distribute 3 billion RNA doses. What is the answer to that question? Is the required dry ice available in the countries, particularly in the developing countries? Patricia?
At this point, because the uncertainty of the models of the vaccines, am I going to say it's a concern? Of course, it's a concern of ours that there's not enough dry ice in certain countries, but it's far too early in the process to start panicking. It's something that we're working through again with our partners and from an investment perspective. So I wish I had a better answer for you, but it is far too early in the process to make those types of predictions.
You know, the good thing is these questions are live questions that are concerns on our minds, and it's up to us as a collective community to begin to offer the answers as time goes on, as we learn more and more. So I think the questions are absolutely phenomenal, and each one of them, I think we have to address. A question that I read is, you expressed quite a bit of data on our failure in the supply chain to handle PPE and medical supplies in the first 6-7 months of the year. What have you at DHL learned which will help the industry get better prepared for the vaccines to be approved? Kunal, I'll start with you and maybe go to Patty as well.
Sure. So I think, the slide number 4 that I covered, right, that actually, we spoke pretty much in detail about all the pain points that we saw and the lessons that we have learned, right? So there were 6 different, topics that I covered, right? So those are the different topics or the pain points that we learned. And of course, as I mentioned, right, the challenge with the vaccine would be more or less the same, but, even more prominent, right, given the temperature requirements and the uncertainties that, we yet do not know, right? So of course, what we'll do is we will continue to, talk to our customers, which are the vaccine manufacturers, the governments, the NGOs, and be prepared for it, for the eventual release of the vaccines globally.
I just want to share this observation made by one of our participants who says that for the RNA vaccine, 70 degrees minus is very, very likely. So question that followed with that observation is the following. Can vaccine distribution be best addressed through private companies like DHL, or would military distribution channels and resources be better suited for the emergency? A very good question indeed. Anyone?
So I can go on it, and of course, Patty, feel free to add anything, right? So again, that would depend on every country, and of course, where they are sourcing the vaccine from, right? Today, we don't know if the vaccine is going to be manufactured locally in a country or whether they're going to be sourcing it from an international source. So I think some of these questions are still, pretty early to answer this, right? But, I would say, it will depend on every country as to what is the best resources to handle, once the vaccine is, officially out and released.
Oh, Kunal, I agree with your assessment. I think it's also important to note that it may be a combination of both in certain cases, where you may have a large forwarder working with the government army to do the distribution. There may be legs that are more feasible for a forwarder versus the government and vice versa.
I see really a very pertinent question that says, and it is relevant for DHL being a global service provider that it is, are there plans for the distribution in the sub-Sahara countries of Africa and other developing countries? A tough question.
I mean, yes, there are plans, and obviously DHL being, as large as we are working also, with the World Health Organization and other UN type organizations, and that's one of the primary concerns, as well as working with our clients that are willing to distribute direct to Sub-Saharan Africa. So yes, it's slated as part of the distribution plans.
The next question relates to one of the observations or one of the slides that you had. How does a customer get visibility of the shipment through your air thermonet system? Could you elaborate on that, please? Patricia?
Sure. So the Air Thermonet and the Live Connect system are on a validated platform called LifeTrack. And there is a method that you can get milestone updates either via email, self-service through the web portal, or by reaching our 24/7 customer service team hotline at 954-626-4242.
The next one goes back to lane risk assessment. What can your customers expect from the lane risk assessment 2.0 capability? But that may very well be the weakest link of the management process.
So the LRA 2.0 enhancements that we've recently rolled out in the past 6 weeks or so include average tarmac time based upon our preferred life science carriers, which is critical to product viability, as well as the seasonality scoring piece of it, packaging performance, and the profiles with the min-max temperature ranges, and then of course the DGF station certifications as well, so that we would be ranked based on the knowledge base from your origin and destination, and if needed in transit stations.
A very deep question. The observation made first is there have been increased tensions among countries under the stress of the COVID emergency. Is DHL encountering any new challenges due to these intergovernmental tensions? Do I need to elaborate on that question?
Yeah, I think you might need to, Devinder.
So basically what they're saying is, where there is so much of tension and maybe even some conflict between countries on the supply and delivery of vaccines, are you at DHL experiencing any such counterproductive pressures? If you are willing to share with us.
I personally have not seen it, no, and I'm on global calls daily. Kunal, I don't know that you have any different experience.
How about you, Dennis?
No, I think so. I mean, from an air freight perspective, certainly no conflicts that have come about that have impacted really the supply chain. I actually think there's been more understanding in the shipping base as a result of the current pandemic. And I would say that countries and distributors, customers, and the whole slew of supply chain in some locations are actually more understanding than they would be in a normal market.
Got you. And what the questioner is probably implying is we might as well get prepared eventually for these conflicts to arise as we get closer to the distribution of the vaccines. Very logical that we should be asking this question at the tail end of our session. What are the reverse logistics implications in this COVID distribution scenario?
So, maybe I could take that at least from a capacity perspective. I think certainly as I mentioned in my segment of the presentation, one of the main possible bottlenecks is in and around the distributional capability of temp control containers. I think there's within that there's a subset of repositioning or the imbalance of containers depending on the main transportation lanes. Certainly a risk, right? When you have to move temperature controlled containers to a region where that manufacturer does not reside or have an actual location or company, there'll certainly be some challenges there. But until we get a real good understanding of the trade lanes and flows, at this point, it's only a consideration.
I'm going to take the final question before we wrap up this very, very useful session we've had. The question is, knowing that military may be called upon to serve in the distribution of the vaccines in certain countries of the world, is DHL prepared to work and interface with those military distributors?
Yeah, I can take that, Deminder. DHL is participating in exchanges with governments and NGOs to bring solid plans into place for the future. The answer to the question essentially is yes, we are prepared and we are in the midst of preparing to be there for the future.
With 100 seconds to go, or maybe 120 seconds to go, and I don't see any more. Do I see one more? Yes, I see one more. I got to get this one. Is there a need for vial level temperature visibility in the end-to-end global supply chain? Patricia.
There have been a few select requests for that, and those are things that we're working through in terms of the capabilities to provide that. It's not a certainty that it's going to be necessary, but it has come up.
So I wish to thank the three very outstanding executives of DHL who have brought and made us smarter today in terms of supply chain implications that Kunal delivered, temperature control challenges that Patricia delivered, and the cargo capacity issues that Dennis delivered. You've given us insights that will help us in preparing for what I believe is comparable to the moonshot when man landed on the moon in 1968. And it's going to require the collaboration of the government, private enterprise, academia, and research institutions, and companies like DHL to make it all happen. So I really, really feel appreciative of DHL doing this. Finally, I just wish to say, nothing is more important for BSMA in the year ahead than to help us prepare for this awesome, awesome challenge of distributing vaccines to 7.8 billion people. And on the 22nd of October, we have a virtual conference here in the US. On the 12th of November, one in Europe. On the 20th of November, one in India. So these are only the first few steps. We welcome you, we invite you, we request you to join and help us all on this very important mission. So thank you. We'll sign off and we'll keep in touch. And be safe, for heaven's sake. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.